Hi, welcome to Nature, Nurture, and Nerd. I'm your host, Jen. Today we're going to be talking about the history of my food and dietary choices. To start with, I'm going to talk about when I was a kid. When I was very little, I don't have a lot of memory about what my food was, of course. I just have some early memories of my mom making a lot of hamburger helper, which I kind of thought was disgusting. The pizza wheels flavor was okay, but all the other ones I just really disliked. They were really bland and blah, just not a taste I liked. When I was a little bit of an older kid, then I can remember more about my dietary history, and I recall that it was very typical to have cereal for breakfast, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or peanut butter and honey sandwich at lunch, and then my mom would make a homemade dinner. She would make food from scratch, including things like making pizza from scratch, making her own dough and everything. And that was a really good thing that she did, and I think that's something I really appreciated from her. Now, my dad, he was a bit of a sugar addict, kind of like me. And he would always buy plenty of cookies and donuts and ice cream, especially ice cream, always ice cream in the house. So I would eat a lot of those things outside of my meals. And my dad was also really good at making some very delicious peanut butter cookies and some really delicious peanut butter fudge. My mom would bake also cookies and pies. And around Christmas time, she would make all kinds of really delicious sweets and treats. So I did have a lot of that junk also. And, other aspects of my diet that were poor was that my dad was, really, really into drinking Pepsi. He was always having Pepsi. And my mom wanted me to drink milk, but I was very used to drinking the Pepsi. So I would this sounds so disgusting to me as an adult, but I would pour half and half into my, I would pour into my glass half of it full of milk and half of it with Pepsi. I'd call it Pepsi milk. So disgusting. But when I was a kid, I liked it. And then I would make some much more unhealthy sandwiches. Like I would make sandwiches with marshmallow cream instead of peanut butter, things like that. When I was a teenager in high school, I stopped bringing lunch with me to school when I was a teenager. They had a little area where you could buy, some stuff with money. And the only thing that wasn't disgusting in there were the chocolate-covered Rice Krispie bars. So when I was a teenager, I'd wake up and I'd have cereal for breakfast. I'd have just one Rice Krispie bar covered in chocolate for lunch because that's what they had at the school that I didn't think was gross. And then I'd come home and I'd get a full-size dinner plate and I would just pile onto that plate, cookies and ice cream and just all kinds of sweet stuff. Donuts, if there was no frosting, if the donuts were plain, I'd make a whole bowl of frosting and I'd put that on the donuts and I'd eat whatever was left over, just eat the straight up frosting. At least homemade frosting, but still loaded with sugar. And then eat dinner pretty much right after that, just an hour or two after that, eat the dinner my mom made. And somehow I managed to stay, really skinny. I only had 18% body fat. Yeah, so I guess I was lucky in that sense. I did have a very fast metabolism. Once I was an adult, in early adulthood, I still made a lot of poor choices. And as a college student, I would eat in the cafeterias. I would eat a lot of you know, cheap things. I'd eat crappy stuff, like a lot of cereal. I'd eat a lot of those ramen noodles and things like that. Um, Sometimes did start to eat, a little bit better. I would go and try different international foods, and that would get, a little more vegetables and variety into my diet that I was normally lacking because I was pretty much eating nothing but, grains and sugars for the longest time. And then, for some reason, when I was in my early 20s, I decided to completely cut out drinking any kind of soda pop. Some people call it pop, some people call it soda. Basically, cutting out the sugary drinks. And I switched to drinking just water, but I would still have fruit juices, thinking that those were healthy and not realizing that they're also full of sugar. But I didn't make a huge change other than I started to make more variety of foods at home. I did start to make, curries more often, have rice and curry or something like that, because I really enjoyed a lot of spice in my food, which I did not have growing up. My mom always made stuff, either with herbs or plain. She didn't like spices. And I really loved spices. So I started making a lot of spicy food. Oh, weird. A woodpecker just landed on my door. Oh, it's beautiful sitting outside, not my way. I'm in a gazebo for filming because the weather is really great today. Very unusual for Minnesota to be having summer-like weather at the end of October. So anyway, I did start to cook more homemade foods, but along with that, I started doing a whole lot of baking, making my own cheesecake, my own pies, my own cookies and brownies and everything, just like all kinds of desserts. I even started making my own baklava, just fancy type of desserts. But always eating a lot of sugar. And I continued, throughout my entire 20s and throughout my entire 20s, I was just having always cereal for breakfast. And don't think of it as, just cereal. I would take my bowl of cereal and I would dump about 8 big heaping spoonfuls of sugar on top of that and eat that. That was a lot of sugar. I'm surprised I didn't get diabetes or get fat. I mean, I did put on some body fat as I got older, of course, but I never became obese or extremely large. And then starting in my 30s, after my daughter was born, I did start to get more trouble with my digestive system and my health. And so I tried to make, a little bit more healthier choices as I moved forward. And when I was in my very early 30s, I did try to start including, following more of like a food pyramid thing where I make sure I'm having some fruits and some vegetables and not only eating the grains and the sugars. And but I also forgot to mention that I was throughout my entire 20s, from my teens through my 20s, that I was a vegetarian. I did have dairy and eggs and occasionally fish, but I was, let's say, mostly vegetarian. So as I decided to get a little more healthy in my 30s, based off of suggestions I got from other people and generally impressions from media and health influencers, I decided the right thing to do would be to go vegan. So I did that. And it did not go well for me. I was trying to be a very healthy vegan. I cut out all kinds of junk, and I was eating, lots of vegetables and fruits and things that I thought were healthy, nuts and things. Um, I just got worse, worse feeling and more tired and worn out and sickly. And eventually, one day I had eggs again, and I just immediately felt so much better. And then I realized, vegan wasn't really right for me. So I went back to eating eggs and dairy and occasionally some fish, like I had been doing before. And then, going forward, although I did feel better, I was still having a lot of problems. And I can go into all those health problems I had some other time, but ultimately it ended up being celiac disease. Misdiagnosed quite a bit before that. But obviously that had a large effect on my diet because I had to switch to going gluten-free. And that was a huge adjustment at first. And I spent a lot of time, learning how to make all the different junk food that I liked, just gluten-free versions of it, which obviously wasn't good for me. So, throughout my 30s, then I was having 30s and even into my early 40s, I was sticking to this gluten-free situation. Because I had to cut out so much and make a lot of changes with becoming gluten-free, I decided not to continue with vegetarian, and at that point I did add a little bit more meat into my diet, but just on occasion, not very often. Just to make it a little bit easier and feel not quite as restricted, since I had an actual restriction that I had to follow at that point. And at one point I came across more weird health problems, and I found out that I have a very weird autoimmune reaction to garlic. And that was harder to get over than, that was harder to adjust to than the celiac thing was. That was harder to adjust to than a gluten-free diet was. And the biggest effect it had on me was that I really had to stop eating at restaurants. I had continued to try, but so often they would get it wrong, or I would tell them, I have a garlic allergy, I can't have any, and they'd bring back a plate just covered with garlic, like they're, I don't know, seemed like they were deliberately trying to harass me or something. So I ended up just saying, forget it, I'm not eating in restaurants anymore. And that really was something that was good for me in the long run. And gradually I started to try to eat a little bit healthier because, once I was in my 40s, then my metabolism was starting to slow down more. So in my early 40s, sometimes I tried a little bit of the paleo diet, but then I would fall back to my normal. I would try a little bit of going low carb, but it wouldn't last too long, and I'd end up back on my normal eating tons of carbs way. And I did try going keto a couple of times, and it never lasted for more than a couple of months, and I'd go back to eating my normal high sugar diet. And for a while, I just kind of gave up on really being too healthy. I would just try not to overdo the sweets. So I'd call it a reduced carb diet, which still was high carbs, but reduced from what I typically had done in the past. And then, a certain time period happened, around 2020 to 2022, where I threw all my healthy eating out the window, and I was stress eating and not exercising, and I did start to put on more body fat than I ever had in my previous years. And at the same time, when I look back on it, I was obviously, my metabolism was slowing down. I was starting to have some of the perimenopause type of changes. Um, you know, Even though that didn't really kick in till later, I do think there were things starting to change at that point. And obviously the stress didn't help. Um, so then we move on to 2023. So in 2023, I started desiring to improve my health more. I started to get more bothered by the, changes that had happened over the last couple of years, and I wanted to get back to where I had been before. So I started trying to just, reduce the sugars a little bit more. And I tried to do some exercising, but I would get really into exercise, but then I'd start getting sick a bunch and I'd give up, and I'd kind of go through that cycle of I'd try to get fit again, but I'd keep getting sick and give up. That was happening a few times. Then I did start to notice some other very negative symptoms of changes, in myself that I didn't like, and I can talk about more of those in another video that's more about health specifically. But one of the things that came out of that was that I went on the keto diet again, but I was able to actually stick to it. I finally had enough motivation to really stick to it. So in February of 2023, I started the keto diet, and a healthy version of the keto diet. I did use meal plans from Zookeeper's Z-Gym website. She does have meal plans there. And I used a keto meal plan from there, and I was sticking to that, doing very well. I did lose a significant amount of the body fat that I had put on, which was excellent. But I still had some digestive discomforts. And in April of 2023, I came across some videos from Dr. Ken Berry talking about a carnivore diet. And that wasn't actually the first time I heard of the carnivore diet. I did hear about it, the year before. I actually heard about it the year before at an event that I was attending. And there was a lady I was talking to at a table, and she was carnivore, and she was talking about it. And that was the first time I'd ever heard about it, but I put it at the back of my mind, and I didn't really think about it again until I came across that video from Dr. Ken Berry. And I decided, why not? Just give it a try, see how it goes. So in April of 2023, I started the carnivore diet. And lo and behold, the digestive system problems disappeared. And problems that I had had for years, for as long as I can remember, that I just thought were normal because I lived with them, disappeared. It was just amazing. So I have been sticking to my version of carnivore since then. And I'm filming this in October of 2024. After going carnivore, I was also able to start working out regularly and really stick to that. So for several months now, I have been working out very consistently in the Z-Gym. And I am continuing to get results. My body fat is still slowly going down. It went down fast at first. Now that I have less to go, it is, getting off slower. But I am getting good results. And I truly enjoy the carnivore diet that I'm on. I do include dairy in mine because I am not having any negative effects. I'm still reducing body fat. And I also include dairy because it makes my food more palatable. And I do have trouble eating enough food. Seems kind of strange, but I don't really have a large, stomach capacity. And one of the problems I had in the past was never being able to eat enough protein because other stuff was taking up too much room in my stomach. I just couldn't fit it in. Now I can fit in enough protein, but it's still really hard to, and I get that satisfied, full feeling way too soon if I don't include some dairy to make it a little more palatable. My blood work shows that I'm still not eating as much as I should, but I am trying. Yeah, and that's pretty much where it's at. Now, my version of carnivore is not absolutely perfect and it's not strict. I view it as a lifestyle and not as it's not a religious or dogma type of thing for me. So yeah, if I'm out hiking up in northern Minnesota and there's little delicious wild blueberries on the side of the trail, I will eat a few of them when I'm walking because they're delicious. Okay, my property up there's got thimbleberries that grow, and I'll pick some thimbleberries off the bush and eat those. But I'm eating them in season and small amounts, and these are not things that have been bred by people to be giant and extra loaded with sugar, so I think they're relatively okay to have in such small quantities, pretty much only in August because that's when they ripe. Maybe September. And then there are a couple of times where I've had some other things. So my mom has dementia, and I made her a nice birthday cake using duck fat, no seed oils. But I did have a sliver of that because she doesn't understand why I'd make her something and then refuse to eat it. So, I don't see it as being incredibly harmful in the entire span of the year if I had one tiny sliver. So I don't fret about stuff like that. And I know for some people they would be unable to handle having something like that without, getting totally off the wagon and going back. And that indeed was the kind of problem I had in the past. In the past, when I was trying to eat healthier, if I did something like that, it would just derail me completely. Completely derail me. But, since I've been carnivore, for some reason, I've been able to resist that. And at first it was harder. Yeah. I have a slightly aggressive personality, and there are times where I'd have to go and use the punching bag because I did crave having stuff, and I had to let out that intense feeling somehow. But yeah, I don't have that trouble now. I mean, last week my husband bought a huge package of these really delicious looking macaroons from Costco, so that's a huge package. Constantly just leaving them everywhere where I can see them and eating them in front of me. And in the past, that would have driven me nuts. But I was able to look at them and see him eating and not care at all. So that's a huge improvement. And yeah, I'm happy. I feel better than I ever thought I'd be able to feel. I'm building strength more than I've ever been able to before. So I'm quite happy with my current diet choices and lifestyle, and that's where I intend to keep it. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.